welcome. This is Megan Bachman with the Yellow Springs News. I'm here with Susan Jennings of Community Solution, and our guest today is Jalyn Q. And to give a little context of where we are, it's been a while since our last episode. So we are in mid-July 2020. It's the 5th month of the coronavirus pandemic. We have also been in a multi-month conversation around how the fact that we're in a 400-year pandemic of racism in our country. And all of these events are really catalyzing all sorts of new conversations and new opportunities for change in our communities. And so we're really honored to have with us today somebody that has been thinking about these issues for a long time, somebody that is rooted in the values of community and of strategic change. And so as we kind of go through this time where there's a lot of upheaval and recalibration of our communities and restructuring, it's really amazing to have this talented voice and visionary with us. So, Jalyn, when I think of you, the phrase "made for these times" kind of comes to mind. So I'm very excited to hear kind of what you've been thinking about. But just by way of introduction, I wondered if you could share a little bit about your work, as well as kind of your deep roots in Yellow Springs.
Certainly. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. I'm honored. My work, my husband and I have a strategic planning company called the Jalyn Group that we've been operating for over 30 years. We have changed our approach. We've really recalibrated our approach from going from a SWOT model to a SOAR model, which is on an appreciative inquiry type of way of looking at strategic planning. You ask better questions, you get better answers. So we're really excited about that and utilizing that in corporate America as well as nonprofits. The other thing that we're really involved in is the nonprofit community empowerment organization. And we've been working in that arena for quite some time now, but we're currently working with the Springfield City School District in engaging parents in the education of their children. And it's been quite challenging. Because of Corona, we had to figure out of COVID-19, we had to figure out a different way to engage, which I think we all have to do.
Absolutely. And, community service, original name of Community Solutions, has been talking about this idea of community for 75 years now. I guess, how do you view community? And if you could share a little bit more about kind of your family's role in this community, the business community, the nonprofit community over many generations.
It has been many generations. It's actually been 8 generations if I can get my great-granddaughter here. But in this home that I'm sitting in, it's been 7 generations. And I don't know if you the photo back there on that wall, that's my great-grandfather, Fielding Dunbar, who actually bought his first piece of property in this area, in the Yellow Springs area, only 18 years out of slavery. And it's a fact that I'm proud of. It's a badge that I wear. And anytime I introduce myself in a public setting in the Yellow Springs, it's something that I say and hold out there as a badge of honor. I did not know Fielding, but I did know my grandmother, who was born in 1898 on Grinnell Road, which many people say should have been named Dunbar Road because they owned more property than the Grinnells on that road. So those are just historical stories that have been brought down through our family. I truly was brought up. I was born and reared here in Yellow Springs, and I was truly brought up with the thought that it takes a village. And when I was growing up, it was a village that that just pitched in and was a part of. I mean, if if I was walking down the street and I wasn't behaving quite well, Evelyn Sykes could say, "Hey, straighten it up." Or, Mrs. McKee could say, "Wait a minute, you're not doing this right." And it was really everyone was involved in a very positive way with um, with moving through, growing up, with becoming who I am. I truly believe that Yellow Springs and the people of the time made me who I am. Going to Antioch School, I mean, I can't spell, but I can change the world. and I I attribute that to the thought and the thought chain makers and the the ideal changers that I grew up around and I grew up with. Um, it was very authentic. It wasn't we were trying to be that way. That was who we were. I remember my father and mother saying to me that truly, truly, I could do and be anything that I want. And this community supported that narrative. Now, not saying that it was perfect, but saying that we worked through as a community together on what needed to be changed, what needed to be better, what our strengths were, where we didn't stand up. So I really that's how I think of community is that um, we are our brother's keepers, but it's a back and forth. I keep you, you keep me. I see a change now.
So, would you like to speak about that change, Jalyn? What are some changes that you have seen?
Well, first of all, change is inevitable. Everything's going to change. Yes, that's inevitable. What our focus needs to be on is on progress. For instance, when and I'm not sure about the correct stats. I might be close. I might not be right on. But when I was growing up in Yellow Springs, which was back in the 50s, 60s, early 70s, we had maybe 33, 35% African American families in our community. When I came back, as my husband says, 14 winters ago, he counts the years by the winters. When we moved back 14 winters ago, might be 17 now. I think that statistic was about 13% of African Americans living in the community. Now, the rhetoric hadn't changed. We still talk diversity. We still, stood on that platform. But talking diversity and being diverse are two very separate things. And I think that it's important that we realize that just because we say we're diverse does not mean that we are. So that's a very big change that I see. Um, and that reflects in all the other areas. Of course, when I was growing up, we had Black businesses. We had a African American chief of police. We had a Black mayor. We had, Mrs. Washington sitting in the bank, greeting people as they came in, and it was just, I saw me, and I don't see me that prevalent anymore. And I think that I think that is I think that's something that needs to be noticed, because when you one of the things that the Jael group does, uh, along with strategic planning. I mean, we don't believe that any company can truly be strategic unless they're diverse, because diversity just brings things to the table that you might not see or might not understand or might not even know of. It helps you look through different lenses. And that's what I think we've lost in Yellow Springs, are those different lenses to look through. Um, I could go down, take my clothes down to Stag's Cleaners, and then jump over to the party pantry where my father had a business, and just it was just part of the fabric. When you take that diversity out, your fabric changes, and I think it's a loss to everyone, because when you look through one lens, it's like going down with blinders on, and you're just blocking yourself. So the board of directors, on nonprofit organizations or in corporations, the management or the work staff, if you don't have that jazz, I call it, that energy from pulling in from different elements and different people and different experiences and different cultures, it's bland, it's gray.
And you're not a bland or gray person.
Oh. Hot or cold.
Yes.
No lukewarm here.
Well, so Jalyn, you spent 30 years, you and Stephen and family spent 30 years in Los Angeles, which of course is, you may not be able to get much difference between LA and Yellow Springs. So I'm sure that was a big transition back to Yellow Springs. And you told us a little bit about how different things were than when you were growing up. But do you see, I mean, there's a reason why you came back, and I'd love to have you reflect a little bit on that, and particularly not immediately, but after you reflect on that, there's this big movement, as you might know, of people out of the cities. There's a lot of flight out of the cities and a lot of rural land being bought up, and people really interested in the idea of communities like Yellow Springs. So as a person who's lived both in a rural village and then in the big city, maybe you have some reflections on where maybe the strengths and weaknesses of both in times of challenge like we're living in.
I do. Um, I can share that. I think we all come back to Yellow Springs. I was going to write a book once, returning, and and the first thing, when you're growing up here, the first thing you want to do is get out of Yellow Springs and into a much bigger place. One thing about Los Angeles, or several things about Los Angeles, you're in a silo. You truly are. I mean, I think I knew my neighbor. I knew, I think I knew her name, but I really didn't know her. And so I used to tease my husband and say, I want to go back. It was the Cheers theme. I want to go where everybody knows my name and they're always glad that I came. So I spent a lot of time coming back to Yellow Springs just for that element of community, of of just feeling warm and feeling wanted. Uh, so that's one aspect of living in a smaller town. Uh, but the city, well, everyone calls Los Angeles a big country city. They don't call it a real city. But the inspiration that I got from the different cultures in Los Angeles was so important. I mean, I used to say people used to say, Los Angeles was, like a big bowl of soup. all melted together. And I said, no, 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 no. It's like a salad where you have tomatoes and you have cucumbers and you have carrots. I mean, everything is different, but it all makes up something that was very, very enticing. So that's what I miss. I miss that. I think what I've seen in some instances that we kind of here now get into almost a group think. It could be because of the introduction of social media. It could be from those different Facebook pages where people get on to do whatever they do, and then someone else joins in to do whatever they do. Um, and then the result usually isn't very good. Uh, you didn't have that so much in a larger city, that group type of thing. You really brought to the table your thoughts, your vision, your look upon something, and that's a real difference between a smaller environment and in a smaller community. You really have to fight against that. You you really have to fight against having the same people on the committees, the same go-to people on the board. Um, I mean, it's so natural to do that you have to have a strategic system in place that you don't end up always hearing from the same people, always having, the same little groups of conversation. So I that's a big difference between living in Los Angeles and living in Yellow Springs. For me, it is.
Very interesting. Well, I want to pivot just slightly, Jalyn. I want to talk a little bit about your role with the Yellow Springs Community Foundation. So when the crisis hit, the foundation was an organization that really kind of leapt into leadership and took, a lead, especially just thinking about what are the short-term needs, food, shelter, how can we take care of people? So I'd love to hear kind of your experience with that, as well as kind of what that next step is now to start thinking more strategically as a village about our future.
Leadership through crisis, I call it. There's a certain mindset. It's different than any other kind of leadership. You don't it's not just your regular leaders that come, to the forefront or that really jump out there. I call them the front line. Leader through crisis is a very different kind of leadership. And with the Community Foundation, I truly believe that they stepped out because they believe in their mission, and I can't quote it to you, but their mantra is like, we're better together, or and when
together we do more or something. Yeah.
Yes. When an organization believes in their mission and their vision, they don't have to think about acting. This is who we are. And that's what the foundation, they have a very dynamic executive director. You pause just to make sure that this is lining up with what you know and who you are, and then you act. And that's what they did. And then very quickly, other entities, other individuals who brought something to the table came on board in those different areas that you spoke about: shelter, hunger, businesses closing. What is it? The thing that we have to be very careful with when we're leading through crisis is that we don't enable people. businesses, organizations. People have to have equity in the progress, and you don't want to just be fixing it because people convinced against their will are of the same opinion still. They're not going to do anything. They're going to just sit back and be, be that. So it's a very balancing environment that you create, that you're not just doing for, but you're doing with.
Okay, I have a challenge question for you then, Jalyn, because I'm really appreciating these reflections on Yellow Springs and our process. If you were to do a SOAR, so strengths, opportunities, aspirations, results, if you were to do that,
Get it, girl.
in your mind, do it in your mind with the various players or the various, challenges and opportunities you see before us. Do you have a couple reflections that may be a little bit different than what our lenses are now pointing us toward?
I would say that I think that the stakeholders, I think that we need to have the right stakeholders present. And I think that when you're leading through crisis, you lead, you jump in and you do. One of the things like a SOAR allows us to do is to ask better questions. Because when we ask better questions, we're going to get better answers. And I think we need now in this stage, I call this not the new reality, I call it the next reality, because change is inevitable, right? It's going to be always a next reality. So in this next reality, I think we need to really focus on asking some better questions and really, what is it that we want? Have we identified that? And what is it that, and then we ask those questions on that area and on that level, and those are the answers that we're going to start to get coming back. Susan, you just blacked out on us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you still see me?
Oh, there you go.
Okay. So actually, I have a quick follow-up. It's not really a question, but it's a comment, because I really appreciate that. And I think one of the things that we've been thinking about at Community Solutions and Agraria, and I know Megan's thinking about this too, are really kind of the long-term ramifications of what's happening, and really looking at the models of people who have done things differently over time and in different cultures, and looking for other models besides let's try to get back, or let's just deal with a crisis, but really stepping back and asking, why are we here? And for us, there's part of the community piece, the long-term vision that Arthur Morgan had, but then also how much of what ails us is really a collapse of diversity of all kinds, biodiversity, diversity in cultures. So I really do appreciate your comments, and I think maybe we ought to be looking at a SOAR process for the village moving forward, because it does feel like a good way to kind of get out of the crisis mode and into a kind of generative mode about the future. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yes, Jalyn, go ahead.
Generative, we call it generative questioning. What does it generate? What does it bring about? What does it transform you to be? Not who you are now, but who do you need to be? And I think that is so important. When you look at crises come. I mean, I'm X amount of years old. Crises come. And you either get out of them bitter or you get out of them better. And it's a choice. It really is. And what you choose, that's who you transform out of the crisis to become.
One of the reasons, Jalyn, that I really wanted to talk to you is because you have this, I think it's kind of a contagious positivity. And it's such a time of fear about the future and anxiety and stress, trauma. I guess, how do you stay hopeful?
Well, I believe in God, and I decided a long time ago how I wanted to live my life, and I wanted to live my life in hope. I wanted to live my life in positivity because uh, it's quite selfish. It's because what it brings back to me, uh, because what it allows me to do, because how it allows me to operate. I don't I don't take anything away for people who have anxiety or fear or any of that. All I suggest is don't stay there. Figure out a way for you not to stay there. Because what's my favorite song? Is it Lou Rawls? It's a Wonderful World. You deserve part of that.
Well, thank you so much, Jalyn, for being with us today. I got a ton out of this conversation. It's given me a lot to reflect on with our community and how we can move forward and do so with hope in our hearts about being that better place that we often talk about.